It began with a silence too loud to ignore, the kind that descends right after injustice, just before outrage. On the cracked streets of Southside Chicago, a teenager named Malik was shoved to the pavement by a police officer, his back hit the ground with a thud, his eyes locking with a woman holding a phone, recording. Malik didn't scream. He stared, through the lenses, through the hands that pinned him down, into the eyes of a nation that kept pretending not to see. And across the ocean something stirred. Thousands of miles away, in Ouagadougou, the flicker of a ham radio buzzed awake in a dimly lit room. The signal was scratchy, but intentional. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's voice moved through the static like thunder crawling beneath the earth. To my brothers and sisters in America, listen carefully. They have fed you lies long enough. The words didn't explode. They settled deep in the bones of those who heard them. In a Brooklyn apartment, Maya Jones adjusted her antenna, heart beating faster. She wasn't sure what moved her more, the message or the fact that someone else finally seemed to know. Traoré's words didn't call for pity. They called for memory, for resistance that smelled of soil, blood, and rusted chains never fully broken. They erased your names. They made you kneel to gods that weren't yours. But Africa didn't forget you, he said, each syllable like a stone dropped in water. Maya sat frozen, the window behind her revealing sirens flashing across Lenox Avenue. She'd spent her life documenting oppression with a journalist's objectivity. But this wasn't reporting. This was awakening. On the street, the police tightened their perimeter, but the crowd grew thicker. They weren't shouting yet. They were listening, as if the voice crossing oceans reached them too. Traoré continued. We carved your names into baobab trees. Our soil remembers. And now, our soil calls to yours, not to rescue you, to rise beside you. And like an invisible cord pulled tight, the protesters began to chant. Not names of martyrs this time, but a name many didn't yet know. Ibrahim. News outlets scrambled to make sense of it. Who was this man? Why now? Across media feeds, fragments of the radio message leaked. If they come for you in Brooklyn, we will stand. In Ouagadougou. If they choke you in Rio, we will rise in Bamako. In Harlem, a mural of George Floyd grew wings. In Lagos, children painted the words on walls. This is not charity. This is a battle plan. The streets were stirring, and not just in protest. They were preparing. Maya found herself writing without stopping, not for publication, but for record, for truth. They think we're minorities, she whispered, rereading the transmission. We are the majority of the future. Her editor refused to publish her story, said it was too political, said Traoré was a foreign extremist, said the readers wouldn't understand. So she uploaded it herself on an old forum only archivists used anymore. Within hours, the file had crossed 3 continents. It wasn't viral. It was surgical. It didn't trend. It spread. Deep within that wave, beneath the surface, the past began to leak into the present. Stories that had long gathered dust in schoolbooks were being retold by grandmothers and radio hosts alike. That time in 1961, when French troops watched miners collapse from uranium poisoning, wasn't just a footnote. It was a matchstick. A Congolese engineer in Montreal began encrypting old shipping records into school apps. Every mine they stole, he said in an interview. We've mapped 1,000 more. Meanwhile, in the South, Malik's case disappeared from mainstream media. Just another file, just another bruise. But underground the rhythm beat on. Traoré's second message was shorter, colder. They pixelate your pain. We remember it, in flesh. In a dim New Orleans shack, an old veteran played the broadcast twice, then dug into his attic for a photo of a man in Mali he once served beside. Same eyes as Malik. The system didn't break. It hissed, doubted. tried to laugh it off. A CNN host called it conspiracy theater. A senator called it Afro-nihilism. But the whispers kept moving. African elders from Guinea uploaded oral records, dates, names, slave ships. Schools in Ghana started teaching Sankara's speeches as required curriculum. And in Detroit, students printed them in T-shirts, wearing his words in schools that banned history. What made this different wasn't the volume. It was the silence between the beats. A librarian in Nigeria refused to archive a French-funded database. A Haitian school painted over UN flags with indigenous patterns. A Brooklyn DJ played an unknown voice over a Tupac beat and called it the broadcast of blood. They didn't march with signs. They whispered names. They coded archives. They waited. Then came the public reckoning, not with fire or fists, but a courtroom. The setting was sterile, glass walls, a security line, journalists scribbling on notepads. Maya sat quietly, clutching a manila folder. The contents were declassified training manuals showing U.S. officers being trained with colonial insurgency methods used in Algeria. She didn't shout. She read one sentence. Methods of crowd dispersion, same as in Dakar, 1958. Silence. Across the world, in a digital art installation in Johannesburg, Traoré's voice echoed again. You are not what they stopped. You are what they fear. At that exact moment, a senator's phone vibrated with a leaked video of a drone strike mislabeled as a counter-terror mission. The victim was a farmer. The coordinates had been faked. Maya looked up. This isn't new, she said. This is inherited. The courtroom fell still. The judge leaned forward. The stenographer paused. That pause stretched across oceans. In Burkina Faso, students hacked the regional satellite grid. In Brazil, a mural showed a black girl planting cassava, every route marked with QR codes. In New York, a school library unveiled a banned section marked, "They tried to erase this." The antagonist, the system, didn't collapse with noise. It eroded, slowly. The CEO of a major tech company resigned quietly after leaked emails showed biometric data being sold from African vaccine trials. A general was removed from the Pentagon's Africa desk. No trial, no charges, just a press release and a silence too sharp to ignore. Back home, Maya stood in her grandmother's living room, watching a child trace the routes of slave ships on a map she printed herself. We were never gone, Maya whispered. Her grandmother nodded. We were just waiting for the transmission. The days after felt quiet, but not dead, reflective. The camera zooms in on scenes too small for headlines. A European banker staring blankly as his calls go unanswered by African partners. A French soldier glancing nervously at his shadow in an empty airstrip. A senator finding his speech drowned by silence. And an old man in Detroit holding a golden tooth, his father's, shaped from uranium, mined in the Sahel. In a schoolyard, in Johannesburg, a teacher tells students, "The textbooks lied. Your ancestors didn't just survive, they built systems these men still fear." And in Brooklyn, a small girl recites a poem ending in, "I am not their footnote, I am the headline." The final message came not by video, but by static. Old. Radios in Harlem, Kingston, Lagos all crackled to life at once, and then they bombed our towers, we rebuilt with drums, they sanctioned our food, we traded in gold teeth, they erased our names, we carved them into stars. And then a sound, half chant, half hum, crossed every frequency. Captain Traoré's voice was softer now, worn perhaps, or maybe just closer. The soil remembers, so must you. And then came the proof. Scrolling across screens hacked mid-broadcast, thousands of coordinates, secret archives, asset maps, names of villages erased from textbooks, and a final signature. You want receipts? We kept them. In the months that followed, governments pretended nothing had changed. They released reports, held presses, blamed the internet. But the shift was already growing, not in ballots, in backyards. Seed exchanges began to replace food banks. Libraries began swapping colonial history sections for oral recordings. And children, everywhere, began asking the right questions. 1. Scene closes on a man alone in a high-rise, watching a news anchor blink in Morse code. He reaches for the remote but pauses. The code spells, "Too late." Another ends on Maya, walking into a classroom where children recite the African Union Charter from memory, only to pause and ask, "But why didn't they ever teach us this before?" And then there's the grandmother in Port-au-Prince who opens a Bible not to read, but to pull out a slip of paper with coordinates. She smiles. Now it's time. The very last moment is not dramatic. A child bends down, digs a small hole in sun-baked earth and places a seed. Not just any seed, a genetically encoded cassava root marked by a history older than any flag. Behind her, an old transistor radio whispers, "We are one body. They cannot cut us apart anymore." And as the camera pans upward, rising into the clouds above the dust of struggle and the scars of centuries, one final thought remains. We were never broken. We were simply waiting for the signal. And now, it has arrived.